In Peru, social movements and relatives of victims of Dina Boluarte government's repression gather in Lima to demand justice. In Mexico, authorities report the arrest of those allegedly responsible for setting fire to the immigration center in the city of Juarez, where 39 people died. And in Israel, citizens take to the streets once more to protest against the judicial system reform. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from teleSUR, from the studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Peru, several organizations held the first national meeting of victims of the Dina Boluarte government after the massacre of innocent people on January 9th. The event took place in the morning hours in the Coliseum of the Chapel of the city of Juliaca, with the participation of more than 40 people, made up of relatives and victims of the deceased. In this sense, the president of the Association of Martyrs and Victims of the 9th of January, Raul Samiyan Xanga, emphasized that the regions that suffer repression by the government will be present. He also expressed that in order to carry out this event, official letters were sent to institutions to pay for the expenses. Meanwhile, the participants in the activity exclaimed that the objective of the meeting will be the strengthening of victims against the regime of Dina Boluarte. On Friday, Colombian President Gustavo Petro met with the peace delegation and members of the international community in charge of dialogues with the National Liberation Army as part of the talks they hold to reach a consensus and eventually a ceasefire. Petro's call comes after an attack against an army unit in Catatumbo region on Wednesday, which left 9 dead and 9 wounded. During the meeting at the presidential headquarters, they evaluated current events and the future course of dialogues. In the end, the High Commissioner for Peace, Danilo Rueda, assured that despite the crisis they are going through, the government maintains its willingness to continue with the negotiations in Cuba, where the third round is expected to begin in the next few weeks. To support this process, he requested a faster bilateral ceasefire from the ELN.
This extraordinary meeting with President Gustavo Petro and the immediate response of the accompanying warrantor countries and the Catholic Church clearly expressed the willingness to support the development of dialogues that are currently going through crisis and setbacks. We have shared the message of many communities from territories where the National Liberation Army operates with the President and with all the members of the dialogue table. This is a message of solidarity with the soldiers who have fallen, but also an urgent call for the ELN to act according to its purposes and political principles.
In Mexico, authorities reported the arrest of those allegedly responsible for setting fire to the immigration center in the city of Juarez, where 39 people died. The General Prosecutor's Office of the Republic informed local media about the arrest of 5 people accused of starting the fire at the shelter where 67 people were locked up. Sara Irene Herrerias, specialized prosecutor in human rights, announced in a press conference the arrest of the suspected persons responsible for the fire, claiming the lives of 39 people. Meanwhile, authorities reported the temporary closure of the National Migration Institute in the city of Juarez, while the head of state, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, went to facilities where the survivors are being held to make sure that the victims receive the best care possible. The Red Cross warned about the increase in armed violence in Haiti and indicated that some 3 million of the 11 million people living in the country have been affected by this phenomenon. After a visit to the country, representatives of the Red Cross warned that violence is not the only crisis afflicting Haitian society and that citizens are suffering from economic problems as well as poor sanitation. The authorities regretted the deterioration of the situation in Port-au-Prince as well as in other areas of Haiti. They also denounced the advance of gangs and armed groups that have taken control of the island. Specialists assure that the increase in violence disrupts the lives of citizens and affects their access to health and other essential services.
We have approximately 3 million people affected by armed violence, and this has an impact in terms of their lack of access to basic health services, restrictions on movements, and the impossibility of accessing essential services.
The head of the International Committee of the Red Cross for Panama and the Caribbean, Marisela Silva, detailed that if we compare the conflict in Ukraine with the situation of violence in Haiti, it is surprising that there are more wounded in Haiti. She also called on the international community to give a firm response and stop this crisis, which has lower media profile than the conflict in Ukraine and therefore less funding.
If we compare today a week in Haiti and the impact of armed violence in Haiti with a week in Ukraine with that devastating armed conflict, we may be surprised to see that in the same week there may be many more deaths and many more wounded in Haiti than in Ukraine. It is necessary for the international community to take firm action to enable this humanitarian response to the needs of an extremely vulnerable population. There are crises that are, in one way or another, much more covered by the media, such as, of course, the conflict in Ukraine, which is one of the contexts with the highest level of funding and which unfortunately overshadows the possibility of positioning the needs in other crises.
Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the south. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko said his country is seeking the deployment of nuclear weapons on its territory to prepare for an invasion from Western countries. During his address to the nation and parliament on Friday, the Belarusian head of state said that Moscow's plans to place nuclear arms in Belarus would help safeguard the country, which he stressed was under threat from the West, and especially from neighboring Poland.
Under current circumstances and the military-political situation around our country, I've strongly activated talks with Russian President Putin about the return of nuclear weapons to Belarus, and specifically about the return of nuclear weapons that were withdrawn in the 1990s. I want to defend the Belarusian state and ensure peace for the Belarusian people. My people deserved it with its history, with its whole existence. We don't want to live under the whip anymore, and we will not be slaves.
Lukashenko called on the parties involved in the conflict to reach an unconditional ceasefire and to not use it to regroup their forces and improve their positions in the battlefield. The Belarusian leader was not optimistic, however, and considered the Ukrainian counteroffensive as a very dangerous step for world peace.
We need to stop now, before the escalation, and not try to take a risk to suggest to stop fighting. Many, specifically in Russia, can say we already stopped in the Donbass. This is another moment and another situation. Taking into account those conditions, it is necessary to stop fighting. A truce should be declared without the right to move the regrouping of troops from both sides, without the right to transfer weapons and ammunition, manpower and equipment. But as you can hear, there is a lot of talk about counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine. In my opinion, this is extremely dangerous. This is the worst thing that is possible in the current conditions, because it can cross out all hopes for the negotiation process and lead to an irreversible escalation of the conflict.
Former Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff was appointed as head of the BRICS New Development Bank. The organization finances infrastructure and sustainable development projects, what Russian authorities and the BRICS Women's Business Alliance expect from the new development bank led by Dilma Rousseff is covered in our next story.
Bank of the BRICS countries has a new governor. Dilma Rousseff is the new governor. The Board of Governors of the financial institution unanimously approved her nomination. Brazil's former president has replaced Brazilian diplomat Marcos Troillo as head of the bank.
We have always had very good relations with Brazil in general. Historically, they were at a very high level during Mrs. Rousseff's presidency. We hope that she will have the same sympathy for the Russian Federation and that we will build constructive relations.
As far as I can see, the current head, she was, well, I have to say that the entire Brazilian leadership had a friendly attitude towards Russia, and irrespective of political preferences, which is also very important.
The BRICS countries created the new development bank in 2014. It finances infrastructure and sustainable development projects. Its clients include not only members of the five.
The BRICS Women's Business Alliance has a number of projects and an interest in working with the new development bank. Therefore, we expect that there will be new, perhaps financial instruments for women's projects to be recognized by the BRICS Development Bank.
The portfolio of projects approved by the bank has already exceeded 30 billion, and Russian authorities have not previously ruled out using the bank's platform to discuss the creation of a single currency for the bloc. Dilma Rousseff took over as president of the bank immediately, in accordance with the organization's internal procedures. She is expected to hold her post until the end of the next Brazilian mandate in 2025.
In Italy, the government's privacy watchdog has temporarily blocked the artificial intelligence AI software ChatGPT over data privacy concerns. The Italian Data Protection Authority described its actions as provisional until ChatGPT respects privacy. This measure involves temporarily limiting the company from holding Italian users' data. The watchdog said ChatGPT developer OpenAI had no legal basis to justify the mass collection and storage of personal data for the purpose of training the algorithms underlying the operation of the platform. It further referenced a data breach on March 20th when user conversations and payment information were compromised, a problem the United States firm blamed on a bug. Since ChatGPT was launched, it has seen meteoric growth. Millions of people are using the software for activities ranging from developing architectural designs to writing essays. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461 and enjoy Latin American alternative broadcasts. One final short break and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Saturday, new protests against the reform of the Israeli judicial system resumed in the country. These are the first demonstrations in the nation after the government decided to postpone the approval of the measure until the end of July, reports the Times of Israel. Some of the demonstrators in Tel Aviv wore costumes of members of the National Guard, a security agency that could be created if approved at the next cabinet meeting. Participants marched through the city to the rhythm of the Imperial March from Star Wars. In recent weeks, Israel has been the scene of mass mobilizations expressing rejection of such steps. The reform bill envisages giving the Israeli executive a decisive influence in the selection of judges, as well as limiting the scope of the Supreme Court to overturn laws or rule against the government. The Syrian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates Faisal al-Mekdad paid an official visit to Egypt. During the meeting, which was held at the invitation of Egypt's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sameh Shoukry, topics of common interest were discussed, focusing on the strengthening of bilateral relations between the two countries, as well as the latest developments in the region and the world. This meeting took place after the Egyptian foreign minister visited Damascus, the Syrian capital, on February 27th, when he conveyed a message of solidarity to President Bashar al-Assad from his counterpart Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Iran commemorates Islamic Republic Day on the occasion of the 44th anniversary of the end of monarchy and establishment of its current political system. This April 1st, since 1979, the Iranian people commemorate this historic day, when the nation put an end to 2,500 years of monarchy and established a new form of government based on Islamic values and democracy. Social revolution was possible following a referendum called by the leader of Islamic Revolution, Imam Khomeini, and supported by 98.2% of participants. The country's authorities highlighted the caution of Islamic Revolution leader Ayatollah Sayyid al-Khamenei, the surveillance of Iranian law enforcement agencies, as well as the resistance of the Iranian people in the face of several foreign aggressions. The Israeli occupying police assassinated a Palestinian citizen at the beginning of Ramadan, the Muslim holy month, in the old city of Jerusalem. The victim, identified as Mohammed el-Lasabi, 26-year-old, was from the city of Hura and died in an incident that is still under investigation. The occupying forces claimed that he tried to take a weapon from one of their soldiers, but witnesses and several media reports said that the young man was trying to defend a woman when he was killed by Israeli forces. Occupying troops have been on high alert for several days because of Ramadan commemoration. Fridays become especially aggressive in the presence of some 150,000 Muslims. United Nations spokesperson for the Secretary General Stephen Dujarric updated journalists on Friday over the humanitarian response to urgent needs in Ethiopia.
Turning to Ethiopia, where our humanitarian colleagues are responding to continuing urgent needs across the country. In the north, access continues to improve, and we, along with our non-governmental organization partners, have expanded operations in the Afar, Amhara, and Tigray regions. In Tigray, more than 4.7 million people have received food assistance this year, and in Afar and Amhara, more than 2.5 million people have received food assistance since mid-November of last year.
The high UN official also referred to the emergency food support in drought-hit areas in the south and east of the country, as well as the effects of floodings in the Somali region.
Along with the government, we are scaling up the response in the south and the east, where some 11 million people in drought-impacted areas need emergency food support. Our humanitarian colleagues note that in the past week, floods in parts of the Somali region have impacted close to 230,000 men, women, and children. Homes, farms, and infrastructure have been significantly damaged, as we're already present in the region for the drought response. We're now mobilizing support for those impacted by the floods.
Dujarric also updated journalists on the cholera outbreak in parts of Oromia and Somali regions and the need of more material and financial resources to face the crisis.
Meanwhile, the cholera outbreaks in part of Oromia and Somali regions is spreading, with more than 2,300 cases reported, which is twice the number of reported cases in January. 51 people have already died, according to authorities. The response is ongoing, but we need more resources to contain the outbreak. Given the scale of the needs across the country, additional funding is critical. We need close to $4 billion this year. We've only received $727 million, which is only 18%.
The aftermath of Cyclone Freddy continues to affect Mozambicans. The cyclone has displaced some 184,000 people as the country faces its worst cholera outbreak in more than a decade. On Friday, the World Health Organization warned that more than 1 million people face the possibility of contracting cholera, polio, or COVID-19. The WHO representative for Mozambique spoke from Maputo. In mid-March, Cyclone Freddy damaged 163 health facilities, increasing health risks. The WHO representative detailed the fatality rate and praised the work of health professionals. 8 of the country's 11 provinces have been affected, and cases continue to rise. Cholera is an acute diarrhea infection. When severe, it is characterized by extreme water diarrhea and life-threatening dehydration. A major storm system bore down on the U.S. East Coast on Saturday after producing tornadoes and devastating wind across several central states that killed at least 18 people so far. Multiple tornadoes swept through Arkansas on Friday, including in the capital, Little Rock, as well as Mississippi, Indiana, and Alabama, killing at least 11 people. Dozens of others have been reported injured. A spokesman for the Emergency Management Agency in Tennessee, one of the hardest hit states since Friday, confirmed 7 more deaths related to the weather events. The weather event left extensive damage in impacted areas, with several homes torn apart, cars overturned, and trees ripped out of the ground. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders declared a state of emergency and activated the National Guard to help with the recovery efforts. At least 154,000 homes were without power on Saturday. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.